The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Fairfax County Courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished oak floors. The air was thick with anticipation, mingled with the faint scent of coffee and polished shoes. Reporters murmured into microphones, typing furiously on laptops, while photographers adjusted cameras to capture every angle of the high-profile trial. This wasn't an ordinary case. It involved a dangerous suspect accused of crimes against children. The courtroom was packed. Family members, officers, journalists, and legal teams, all present for the evidence presentation. Emma, a tiny 3-year-old girl, sat in the front row, clutching her guardian's hand. Her wide, innocent eyes scanned the room nervously. She didn't fully understand why she was here, why so many serious adults were looking at her, or why a man across the room seemed frightening, yet familiar in some dark way. The guardian whispered softly in her ear, reassuring her with a gentle squeeze, but Emma's gaze kept flicking toward a more unusual figure, a massive police dog lying patiently beside its handler. Ranger, a K-9 officer trained in criminal detection and child safety, rested on the cold floor. His fur gleamed under the sunlight streaming in, muscles taut and alert even as he remained perfectly still. He was trained to read emotions, detect scents, and protect lives. Today, he was more than a dog, he was a silent witness, a partner in uncovering truth. His handler, Officer Hale, crouched nearby, eyes scanning the room as he assessed potential threats. Ranger's ears twitched slightly, nostrils flaring as a faint, almost imperceptible scent reached him, carried in the air around the defendant. The defendant, a man in his late 30s, shifted uneasily in his chair. His lawyer whispered instructions, attempting to mask the defendant's discomfort, but his eyes betrayed him. He was aware that something had gone unnoticed, something crucial that could unravel his carefully constructed story. He glanced at the gallery, noting the reporters' pens poised like weapons. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest. There was a tension in the room that couldn't be fabricated. Something was about to happen, and everyone could sense it, even if they didn't yet know what. The judge, a tall woman with sharp features softened by years of experience, banged her gavel to call the room to order. "All rise," she intoned, her voice firm yet calm. As the room adjusted, she directed the attendees to sit. "We are here today for the case of the state versus Michael Tanner," she began, her eyes scanning the courtroom. "This trial involves allegations of crimes against a minor. All present are reminded of the severity and sensitivity of the proceedings. Let us proceed with decorum and caution." Her words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. Emma, seated in the front row, barely comprehended the words, but she felt the tension like a physical weight pressing down on her small shoulders. She wriggled in her seat, looking around at the towering adults, the cameras, the flashing lights, and the strange energy that seemed to fill the room. Her gaze landed once again on Ranger. Something about the dog made her feel safe, even though the rest of the courtroom made her uneasy. Ranger's calm, steady presence offered reassurance that no human face could. Officer Hale leaned down and whispered to Emma, "Do you want to meet Ranger?" She nodded timidly, lips quivering. Hale held his hand out, a silent invitation. Ranger shifted slightly, lowering his head to meet Emma's small frame. She took a hesitant step forward. Every eye in the courtroom followed the tiny girl. Whispers began to ripple across the room. "Is she going to? And why is the toddler moving toward the dog?" The defendant stiffened, eyes narrowing, as if he could sense a subtle threat emerging in the innocence of a child. Emma reached Ranger, kneeling beside him. Her small hands trembled as she brushed his fur. Ranger sniffed the air around her, then around the room. His gaze sharpened, ears flicking toward the defendant. Hale kept his hand near the dog, ready to react, yet knowing Ranger was fully capable of interpreting the situation. Emma whispered something almost inaudible into the dog's ear, so soft that only Ranger could comprehend it. Immediately, the dog's posture changed subtly, alert, focused, and tense. The atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, but everyone could sense the growing tension. The defendant's unease escalated. His lawyer leaned forward, whispering hurriedly, attempting to distract the jury and press the court into procedural norms, but the energy in the room defied control. Reporters, pens hovered above notebooks, cameras adjusted focus. Every adult felt a ripple of something uncanny, a child and a dog communicating in ways words couldn't describe. Ranger's gaze locked onto the defendant with uncanny precision. The air seemed to thrum with anticipation, and even the judge leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing in subtle curiosity. Emma's small finger pointed in a deliberate, unhesitating motion toward the defendant's bag resting beside him. The courtroom collectively exhaled. The simple gesture carried more weight than any adult testimony could at that moment. Officer Hale exchanged a glance with the judge, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The bag had been overlooked, considered insignificant. Now, under the tiny finger of a child, it became a focal point. Ranger growled softly, low and deliberate, eyes unwavering. It was a signal, a warning that something vital was hidden within. The judge's gavel tapped lightly but firmly on the bench. "Bring the bag forward," she instructed. The bailiff stepped cautiously, opening the bag with measured care. Reporters leaned forward, cameras snapping. The defendant shifted in his seat, his composure fraying. Officer Hale knelt near Emma, whispering soothing words. The child looked up at Ranger, eyes wide, as if confirming that she had done the right thing. Ranger's body remained taut, ready for action but restrained by training. The entire courtroom seemed suspended in a moment of perfect, anxious anticipation. Inside the bag lay a small object, wrapped in fabric, ordinary to any casual observer but extraordinary in this moment. A missing piece of evidence, something overlooked in prior searches, now revealed. The prosecution's eyes widened. The defense team gasped. The judge's lips pressed together, her gaze fixed on the object. Emma clung to Ranger, tiny hands holding his fur. Every whisper, every motion in the room seemed magnified. The defendant's eyes darted nervously. The trial, once steady and controlled, now teetered on the edge of chaos, guided by the unlikeliest pair, a toddler and a K-9 officer. Time seemed to slow. Reporters scribbled furiously, pens scratching across notebooks. The courtroom audience leaned forward in collective suspense. Emma, feeling both fear and an unexplainable sense of authority, whispered again to Ranger. The dog responded, muscles taut, ears flicked, eyes blazing with alertness. It was clear. The moment had arrived when innocence and instinct intersected with truth. Every adult in that room sensed that the balance of power had shifted. The quiet determination of a tiny child and her four-legged companion had begun to rewrite the narrative of the trial. Judge adjusted her glasses, finally breaking the silence. "All right," she said slowly. "We will examine the contents of the bag carefully." The defendant swallowed hard, unease etched across his face. Officer Hale remained vigilant, his hand ready but his faith in Ranger absolute. Emma, small yet resolute, stayed kneeling beside the dog, sensing the tension in ways no one else could articulate. The courtroom, once dominated by adult authority, now revolved around the subtle signals of a child and a dog. Every person present felt the magnitude of what was unfolding, knowing instinctively that this trial would never be the same. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. All eyes remained fixed on Emma, the tiny 3-year-old who had just pointed toward the defendant's bag. The air felt thick, almost tangible, charged with anticipation. Officer Hale crouched slightly, hand hovering near Ranger, ready to intervene if necessary, yet trusting the K-9's instincts completely. Every muscle in Ranger's body was taut, alert. He had sensed what the adults hadn't, the hidden danger, the significance of the object within the bag, and the subtle cues from the child. Emma, unaware of the magnitude of her actions, remained kneeling, small hands resting gently on Ranger's fur. Whispers rippled through the courtroom gallery. Reporters jostled for position, eager to capture the moment for live feeds and headlines. Some questioned the unusual alliance between a toddler and a trained K-9, while others simply watched in awe. The defendant's face had drained of color. His fingers tapped nervously on the armrest. He was unprepared for a trial where the most crucial testimony came from the smallest voice in the room. The lawyers exchanged tense glances. The defense attempted to minimize the impact of Emma's actions, murmuring about theatrics, yet the very walls of the courtroom seemed to reject their argument. "Please step forward," the judge instructed, her voice calm but firm. Every movement Emma made seemed amplified by the charged atmosphere. She obeyed, crawling carefully toward the bag as if guided by some inner understanding only she could access. Ranger shifted slightly, lowering his massive head, eyes locked on the object, muscles quivering with anticipation. Officer Hale followed, silently encouraging the child while ensuring the dog remained poised. The gallery remained utterly silent, as if the world had shrunk to focus entirely on a 3-year-old, and a police dog navigating a room filled with fear, tension, and expectation. Emma's hand hovered above the bag, tiny fingers trembling as she reached forward. Ranger let out a soft, deliberate growl, just audible enough to make the courtroom stiffen. Reporters paused mid-sentence, pens suspended above paper, capturing the moment in perfect stillness. The defendant's jaw tightened. His eyes darted between the child and the bag, panic quietly bubbling beneath a veneer of control. He could feel, even without understanding, that whatever was about to happen would be pivotal. For the first time, he seemed genuinely vulnerable. Hale whispered softly to Emma, "It's okay. Ranger, here with you." She looked up briefly, eyes wide but trusting, then back to the bag. Ranger's massive paw rested beside her, a silent shield. The bond between the girl and the dog was unmistakable. They moved in perfect sync, instinct and trust guiding their every action. The audience could feel it, a partnership forged in courage, precision, and necessity. And the most remarkable part, neither child nor dog spoke a word to anyone but each other. With deliberate care, Emma touched the fabric covering the object in the bag. The courtroom held its collective breath. She could sense something familiar, something that resonated with the fear she had carried for months. The defendant shifted in his seat, attempting to mask anxiety, but it was futile. Every eye followed Emma's small movements, every ear strained to catch the faintest sound of what the child might reveal. Ranger's nose twitched, taking an scent the humans could not detect. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. This was a moment of truth. The bailiff, sensing the tension, stepped cautiously toward the bag. Emma's small hands brushed against the fabric once more, then rested on Ranger for reassurance. He nudged her gently, offering silent encouragement. Reporters scribbled faster, camera shutters clicked, but all of it felt secondary to the quiet intensity in the room. Even the judge leaned forward, noticing the minute details. The subtle growl, the child's hesitant movements, the almost imperceptible stiffness in the defendant's shoulders. Something monumental was about to be revealed, and everyone knew it. Suddenly, Emma's lips quivered as she whispered something directly to Ranger. It was soft, almost imperceptible, yet enough to shift the dog's focus entirely. Ranger's eyes locked on the defendant. A low, deliberate growl rolled from his chest. Gasps swept through the courtroom. The defendant's face blanched further, a sheen of sweat forming across his forehead. Even the seasoned prosecutors felt a shiver. The child had communicated something no adult could. Ranger responded instantly, muscles coiled like springs. The object in the bag, previously overlooked, now had the full weight of scrutiny upon it. The judge raised a hand to maintain order. "All right," she said, voice steady but carrying the weight of authority. "We will carefully examine the contents of the bag." The bailiff, hands shaking slightly despite experience, opened it with caution. Inside, hidden in folds of fabric, lay an item so mundane at first glance that no one had thought to notice it, but its significance was immediate. The prosecution froze, recognizing its importance. The defense paled. The journalists leaned forward, capturing every second. Every detail mattered now. Emma remained kneeling beside Ranger, eyes wide, hands gripping his fur for comfort and courage. Officer Hale whispered, "You're doing great. Ranger is with you." Ranger's head lowered, snout close to the bag, muscles coiled in perfect tension. The child's intuition, combined with the dog's training, had led to a moment adults had failed to orchestrate. Every heartbeat in the courtroom seemed synchronized with the tiny movements of the girl. This was more than a simple trial. It was a demonstration of instinct, trust, and the unexpected ways truth can emerge. The object was carefully lifted and placed on the judge's bench. The room remained silent, Emma's finger still pointed, a beacon highlighting the moment of revelation. The defendant's hands fidgeted, his composure unraveling. He could no longer hide from what had been exposed, nor the implications it carried. Ranger sat like a sentinel, eyes never leaving the defendant. The gallery remained transfixed. Everyone understood that this was not just evidence, it was a turning point. The smallest actors in the courtroom had shifted the trajectory of the trial entirely. A subtle tremor ran through the room as the judge examined the item. Even without words, the gravity was apparent. The prosecution leaned forward, faces tight with anticipation. The defense team whispered urgently to their client, but it was too late. Emma, small and resolute, had spoken to Ranger. Ranger had spoken back in the language of instinct and action. Every adult in the room felt the weight of that silent exchange. The trial, once predictable and procedural, had become a theater of courage, intuition, and revelation. Emma glanced up at Ranger, eyes bright yet cautious. The dog nudged her gently, affirming the silent bond. Reporter pens scratched furiously. Camera flashes lit the courtroom in rapid bursts, but the real story was far beyond media capture. It was here, in the interaction between a 3-year-old and a K9, in the tension coiled in the defendant's shoulders, and in the anticipation crackling like static through the air. For everyone present, the moment was unforgettable. The judge adjusted her glasses, leaning closer to examine the object again. "All right," she said, voice steady, "we will proceed with careful review of this evidence." The defendant's color had drained completely. Emma remained calm, kneeling beside Ranger, her small hands resting gently on his fur. Officer Hale offered a reassuring smile, proud but vigilant. Every adult present sensed the extraordinary nature of what had occurred. A child and a dog had uncovered the path to truth where years of adult scrutiny had failed, and the trial had changed forever. The courtroom buzzed with a silent energy, anticipation crackling like electricity. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, each breath drawn in suspense. Emma's courage, Ranger's training, and the overlooked bag had converged into a moment that would be remembered long after the gavel fell. The defendant, once confident, now appeared fragile, vulnerable to the unanticipated revelations. Officer Hale remained watchful, eyes scanning, yet confident that Ranger and Emma had revealed something crucial. The judge looked around the room, nodding the intensity, the attention, and the unspoken acknowledgement that this trial had entered a new and unpredictable chapter. And then, as the bailiff carefully closed the bag and placed it before the judge, a hushed murmur spread through the courtroom. Every adult understood, even if they could not articulate it, that the smallest, most vulnerable voice in the room had illuminated what the grown-ups had missed. The trial's course had shifted irrevocably, guided by instinct, trust, and courage. Emma, unaware of the magnitude, leaned into Ranger, tiny fingers brushing his fur. The courtroom remained suspended in suspense, every eye trained on the unassuming toddler and the dog who had already become the heroes of the day. The courtroom was tense, every eye glued to the unfolding scene. Emma remained kneeling beside Ranger, her small hands resting lightly on the dog's fur, while the bailiff and the judge studied the object she had revealed. It was small and unassuming, yet its presence carried enormous weight. No one had anticipated that the evidence would be discovered this way. A child and a dog, working together silently, had changed the trajectory of the trial. Murmurs traveled across the room like a ripple of electricity. Every adult present instinctively knew something monumental had just occurred. Officer Hale remained close, his eyes never leaving Ranger or Emma. He sensed the dog's every subtle movement, the way his muscles tensed, the slight tilt of his ears, the glint in his eyes. Ranger had recognized a hidden truth, something adults had overlooked. Hale's instincts told him that the K9 was signaling something critical about the object's significance. The dog's response was instantaneous, precise, and unmistakable, but only the trained could read it correctly. For everyone else, It was a mysterious, almost magical interaction between child and canine. The defendant, Michael Tanner, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His hands clenched and unclenched, trying to maintain composure, but his eyes betrayed panic. He had thought the trial would follow a predictable course, one he could manipulate with practiced calm and carefully scripted testimony. Now, the smallest voice in the courtroom, Emma's, combined with the instincts of a K-9 officer, had disrupted his entire strategy. He swallowed hard, sweat forming on his brow. The tension radiating from him was palpable. His lawyer leaned in, whispering, but even legal counsel could not mask the growing unease. The judge adjusted her glasses and leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she observed Emma. "Miss Emma," she said gently, "would you like to tell the court what you discovered?" Emma hesitated, her lips quivering. She glanced at Ranger, seeking reassurance. The dog's steady gaze and slight nudge gave her the courage she needed. Slowly she rose to her knees, small voice trembling but growing steadier. "It's here," she whispered, pointing toward the bag. The simplicity of her words carried a gravity that none of the adults could ignore. Ranger's reaction intensified. He shifted forward slightly, tail low, growl barely audible but resonating through the room. Officers, lawyers, and spectators instinctively leaned in. Even the reporters, pens poised, held their breath. The dog's posture was a language all its own, signaling danger, recognition, and urgency. Every subtle movement was noticed: the rigid stance, the locked eyes, the barely perceptible growl. No adult could have orchestrated this moment. It was raw instinct amplified by a child's courage. For the first time, the defendant looked genuinely afraid. The prosecution rose cautiously. "Your Honor," said the lead attorney, "we request permission to examine the item further. This is clearly critical evidence previously overlooked." The judge nodded, her gavel tapping lightly. "Proceed with care," she instructed, eyes scanning the room. The bailiff approached again, carefully lifting the bag and its contents for closer inspection. Every eye followed, but attention returned repeatedly to Emma and Ranger. The bond between them, subtle yet undeniable, seemed to carry the weight of the entire courtroom. Emma reached out again, small fingers brushing the object, as if confirming what she already knew. Ranger's head lowered, nose twitching, ears flicking toward the defendant. It was almost as if the dog was silently accusing him, pinpointing the source of danger. The defendant shifted in his seat, hands gripping the armrests. He looked around, realizing the courtroom had changed, no longer governed solely by law but by instinct, courage, and revelation. The dynamic had shifted entirely. Adults, words, and strategies seemed secondary compared to the silent dialogue unfolding between child and dog. The judge spoke again, voice firm yet calm. "We will allow the prosecution to present the evidence as it relates to the case," she said. Emma remained still, gripping Ranger's fur, watching the reaction. Ranger's eyes never wavered, locked on the defendant. The child's presence had created a new axis of attention and authority within the courtroom. Every adult felt it, a subtle shift that couldn't be ignored. Murmurs spread quietly, some whispered admiration, others confusion, but all recognized that this was a turning point. As the prosecution prepared to examine the object, Emma's voice broke the quiet. He did it," she said softly, barely audible, yet enough for Officer Hale to respond with a nod. Ranger growled softly, moving slightly forward, his body tense like a coiled spring. The gallery gasped, the defense team stiffened, and the defendant's hands trembled. He had believed the trial would proceed predictably, but he now faced proof in a form he could not manipulate. A child's observation, validated and enforced by a trained K-9. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The prosecution lifted the object carefully, revealing its true significance. Inside the folds, they found a critical piece of evidence, a small item that directly tied the defendant to the alleged crime. A collective murmur ran through the room. Even seasoned officers exchanged glances, acknowledging that this discovery could change the outcome entirely. The child's intuition, combined with Ranger's trained instincts, had unearthed something adults had missed. The courtroom seemed to pulse with tension, each person aware of the moment's gravity. Emma remained calm, resting against Ranger, unaware of the monumental effect her actions had caused. The defendant tried to speak, voice shaking. This is circumstantial, he stammered, but his words lacked conviction. The strength of the evidence, combined with the silent testimony of a child and a K-9 officer, overpowered his attempt at defense. Ranger's gaze remained unwavering, almost accusatory, focused entirely on the man. Emma, sensing the dog's intensity, whispered again, small and resolute. The judge leaned forward, observing the exchange closely. She understood that something extraordinary had occurred. Truth had been illuminated in the most unconventional way possible. Hale whispered quietly to Emma, reassuring her without breaking the court's decorum. "You're doing amazing," he said. Ranger nudged her gently, a small but affirming gesture. Emma's courage grew with each passing moment. She had approached a room full of strangers, fearlessly interacted with a massive, trained K-9, and instinctively guided the court toward the evidence no one else had noticed. Her innocence had become a catalyst, transforming the trial into a stage for courage, intuition, and revelation. The courtroom's energy was electric, every adult fully engaged, no one willing to look away. The judge called for order. "We will document and review this evidence carefully," she instructed. Her eyes swept over the courtroom, acknowledging the unique dynamics now in play. The prosecution meticulously examined the object, while the defense attempted to contain panic, whispering to their client, though their words seemed futile. Emma stayed on her knees, tiny and composed, beside Ranger. The bond between child and dog had shifted the power in the room, and every adult felt it viscerally. The trial, once conventional and predictable, had transformed into something profoundly unusual and compelling. As the minutes stretched, tension grew almost unbearable. The defendant's hands twitched nervously. Officers whispered quietly among themselves, confirming the importance of the discovery. Reporters documented every detail. Yet all eyes kept returning to the small, unwavering figure of Emma and the powerful, attentive presence of Ranger. Each subtle motion, the dog's twitching ears, the child's steady fingers, held more significance than any adult argument or procedural motion. The room seemed frozen, time suspended by the sheer gravity of a toddler's courage and a K-9's instinct. Finally, the judge allowed a brief recess. The defendant slumped back slightly, exhausted by the unexpected turn of events. Emma remained beside Ranger, unaware of the chaos she had catalyzed. Officer Hale gently guided her hand over the dog's fur, reinforcing the sense of protection and accomplishment. The gallery remained buzzing quietly, whispering about the extraordinary display of instinct, trust, and bravery. Emma and Ranger had not just discovered evidence. They had commanded the attention and respect of an entire courtroom, changing the course of justice with an unlikely, unspoken partnership. Even outside the courtroom, reporters exchanged astonished glances. "Did you see that?" one whispered. A toddler and a dog uncovered evidence adults overlooked for months. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and yet no headline could fully capture the tension, the bravery, or the quiet determination that had defined the moment. Inside, the judge, lawyers, and spectators understood the profound significance. Intuition, courage, and trust had outweighed experience and procedure. Emma's small hands and Ranger's trained instincts had illuminated the truth, setting in motion a chain of events that would reshape the trial forever. The courtroom remained tense as the bailiff carefully positioned the object on the judge's bench. Every eye followed the small package, a silent acknowledgement of its significance rippling through the room. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras capturing each subtle movement, yet nothing could compete with the quiet, charged presence of Emma and Ranger. The toddler remained kneeling beside the K-9, hands lightly resting on his fur, drawing reassurance and courage from his steady weight. Officer Hale crouched nearby, eyes scanning the room, confident that Ranger's instincts were reliable, but ready to intervene if necessary. The defendant shifted in his chair, a thin sheen of sweat forming along his brow. His eyes darted nervously between the package, Emma, and Ranger. His carefully cultivated composure was fraying under the weight of this unexpected turn. For months, he had believed the trial would be predictable, controlled, manipulable. Now, a 3-year-old child and a dog had revealed what adults had overlooked. Every instinct told him that his defenses were crumbling. His lawyer whispered urgently, attempting to distract or redirect the courtroom, but the subtle authority of the child K-9 pair was undeniable. The judge leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the package. "We will examine the evidence carefully," she said, her voice carrying both firmness and curiosity. The bailiff slowly unwrapped the fabric, revealing a small item hidden within. At first glance, it appeared innocuous, a personal belonging, perhaps a trinket. But as the prosecutor's eyes widened, it became clear that this object connected directly to the allegations at the heart of the case. A gasp ran through the gallery. Every person in the room sensed the gravity of what had been discovered. Emma's small hands trembled slightly as she shifted closer to Ranger. He lowered his head, nudging her gently as if to say, "You're doing the right thing." The dog's eyes never left the package, and every subtle movement conveyed the urgency and significance of the moment. The courtroom fell silent. Even the murmurs of the press and the whispers among spectators seemed to fade as the reality of the discovery sank in. For a moment, time slowed. Every heartbeat echoed in the minds of those present, each one synchronized to the tension in the room. The prosecution carefully lifted the item for closer examination. It was small but unmistakably important, an overlooked piece of evidence that tied the defendant directly to the alleged crime. The defense team paled, realizing that a single object, revealed by the intuition of a toddler and confirmed by a K-9 officer, could unravel their strategy entirely. The defendant's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. His carefully rehearsed arguments felt hollow in the presence of this undeniable revelation. The courtroom's energy had shifted, and the balance of power had moved irrevocably. Ranger's body remained coiled and tense, a silent sentinel enforcing the truth. The dog had reacted to a combination of Emma's signals and the scent emanating from the package. Every subtle motion, ears flicking, muscles tightening, eyes narrowing, communicated something the adults could not fully interpret but could instinctively feel. Emma, small but courageous, leaned slightly closer to Ranger, drawing reassurance from his presence. The room's attention, once dispersed among lawyers, journalists, and observers, now centered entirely on the unlikely duo and the object they had revealed. The judge observed the exchange carefully, her lips pressed together in concentration. She recognized the extraordinary nature of what was occurring. A child had guided the discovery of critical evidence, and a trained K-9 had validated its importance through instinctual behavior. No adult action had directly led to this revelation. It had emerged organically, from trust, intuition, and courage. The courtroom seemed to hum with quiet anticipation, as though waiting for a single spark to ignite the next phase of the trial. Emma whispered again, almost inaudibly, to Ranger. The dog responded instantly, growling low and deliberate, eyes fixed on the defendant. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The defendant's hands trembled on the armrests. He had not anticipated this. All the months of preparation, of rehearsed testimony and calculated behavior, could not withstand the simplicity and purity of a child's observation, amplified by a K-9's trained instincts. Every adult present felt a shiver, a recognition that the moment was extraordinary. The prosecution carefully documented the object and its contents. Officer Hale guided Emma to kneel close by Ranger, offering soft reassurance without breaking the court's formality. The gallery remained still, journalists frozen mid-note, cameras clicking in rapid succession. The child and the dog had captured the room's attention in a way that no words could match. Even seasoned officers exchanged glances, acknowledging the power of instinct paired with courage. The defendant's composure faltered further. He realized that he faced a courtroom no longer guided solely by logic or procedure, but by the profound revelation of innocence and instinct. The defense attorney finally spoke, voice tight. "Your Honor, we request a review of this evidence, but we question its validity given the circumstances." The judge's gaze sharpened, unwavering. "The evidence will be considered, regardless of its discovery method," she said firmly. Every subtle movement of Emma and Ranger underscored the moment's authenticity. The child's finger remained pointed toward the defendant, and the dog's eyes locked on him unwaveringly. This silent partnership had already proven more effective than any strategy or procedural tactic. The courtroom seemed suspended, every person aware that they were witnessing something rare. The defendant attempted to regain control, but every action seemed futile. Ranger's growl persisted, measured but authoritative, his posture unyielding. Emma remained kneeling beside him, confident despite her size, sensing the significance of the moment in ways that adults could not articulate. Officer Hale whispered encouragement, reinforcing her quiet bravery. The courtroom watched in awe as this unlikely duo had not just uncovered critical evidence, but had established an undeniable truth in the face of resistance, doubt, and manipulation. The defendant's anxiety was palpable, a tangible presence that heightened the tension further. The judge, acknowledging the gravity of the moment, called for a brief pause. "We will review this evidence carefully and proceed accordingly," she said. The bailiff carefully secured the item, while the courtroom buzzed with quiet speculation. Reporters whispered among themselves, cameras still focused. Every adult understood that this trial had changed dramatically. Emma, small and unassuming, and Ranger, a disciplined and intuitive K-9, had guided the discovery in a way that no one could have predicted. Their presence had shifted the power dynamics, capturing the attention and respect of everyone in the room. As the courtroom momentarily emptied for procedural discussion, Emma remained beside Ranger. Her hands rested gently on his fur, small fingers clutching the coarse hair. The dog's steady breathing and alert posture conveyed reassurance. Officer Hale knelt nearby, whispering softly, "You've done something incredible today." The child's eyes lit up slightly, though she did not fully comprehend the impact of her actions. Outside the formalities, the courtroom's atmosphere remained thick with anticipation, tension, and awe. For everyone present, it was clear that the smallest voices and instincts could wield the most powerful influence. The defendant slumped slightly in his chair, attempting to mask the swelling panic. He had underestimated the power of innocence and intuition, the kind that comes without training or manipulation. Emma and Ranger had revealed a truth that adults, for all their experience, had missed. The prosecution prepared to integrate this new evidence into their strategy, while the defense scrambled for solutions. The gallery waited, rapt, fully aware that a pivotal moment had occurred, one that would determine the trajectory of the trial. The child and the dog had become the unexpected linchpins of justice, commanding attention and respect beyond their years. As the judge signaled for the court to resume, the quiet anticipation reached a palpable peak. The courtroom felt electric, every movement observed, every glance scrutinized. Emma remained calm beside Ranger, hands steady on the dog's fur, eyes wide with determination. The defendant's nervous glances betrayed an awareness that control had slipped from his grasp. Ranger's low growl continued, subtle yet firm, underscoring the truth revealed by the child. Every adult, whether prosecutor, defense attorney, or spectator, was acutely aware of the extraordinary moment, a testament to courage, intuition, and the undeniable bond between a child and a K-9. Even the press, trained to observe without emotion, struggled to contain awe. "Incredible," whispered one journalist to another. "A child and a dog uncovered evidence no one else could." Camera flashes illuminated the courtroom in sporadic bursts, yet the true story was the quiet, charged moment of revelation, of courage, and of instinct. Emma's innocence had become a catalyst, Ranger's training a tool, and together they had shifted the trajectory of the case. Every heartbeat in the room seemed synchronized with theirs, a testament to the power of the smallest voices. The courtroom's energy had shifted completely. A heavy silence lingered as the judge and attorneys examined the object Emma had uncovered. Reporters whispered and scribbled notes feverishly, their cameras snapping almost instinctively. Every adult in the room could feel the tension radiating from the smallest corners, the defendant's chair, the jury box, and even the gallery where spectators leaned forward, eager to catch every subtle movement. Emma remained kneeling beside Ranger, her tiny fingers resting lightly on his fur. The dog's massive head hovered protectively over her, muscles coiled, eyes alert. They had become the silent heartbeat of the trial. Officer Hale crouched near Emma, a steadying presence. "You're doing amazing, Emma," he whispered quietly, careful not to disrupt the courtroom. Ranger's body shifted slightly in response, a silent nudge reinforcing the bond between the toddler and the K9. Emma looked up briefly at Hale, then back to the bag, comprehension slowly dawning. She was beginning to understand the weight of the moment, though not its full implications. For the first time, the courtroom witnessed a child's bravery paired with a dog's instinct, combining to reveal what adults had overlooked for months. The defendant, Michael Tanner, leaned back in his chair, exhaling shakily. His hands gripped the armrests. He had been confident just moments ago, certain in his ability to manipulate the trial through rehearsed statements and legal technicalities. Now, the combination of Emma's instinctive knowledge and Ranger's trained alertness left him visibly shaken. He could sense the courtroom's collective focus had shifted toward the child and the K9. Every subtle glance, every whisper, every shuffle of a pen seemed amplified. He was no longer in control. The judge, a figure of authority and calm, leaned forward slightly. "Emma," she said gently, "would you like to tell us what you know?" The child's lips quivered as she looked from Ranger to the judge, hesitation in her eyes. But Ranger remained unwavering, nuzzling her gently as if to remind her of her strength. Taking a deep breath, Emma whispered two words: "He hurt." The courtroom froze. Silence enveloped the room, heavier than any gavel could impose. The words were simple, yet their weight pressed down on every adult present. A murmur ran through the gallery. Journalists paused mid-note, cameras clicking almost subconsciously. Even the most seasoned lawyers exchanged startled glances. The defense attorney's face drained of color. Tanner swallowed hard, attempting to respond, but his voice faltered. He had not anticipated that a toddler could provide testimony that directly implicated him. Ranger's growl resonated low and deliberate, reinforcing Emma's words. The combination of her courage and the dog's instinct created an undeniable presence that no adult could ignore or dismiss. The prosecution immediately recognized the significance of the statement. They leaned forward, their faces tight with anticipation. "Your Honor," said the lead attorney, voice steady but laced with excitement, "this statement, combined with the evidence discovered, corroborates our case. The child has identified the impact of the defendant's actions, supported by the K9's response." The judge nodded, absorbing the layers of implication. Even in a room trained to rely on procedure and protocol, the instinctive revelation from Emma and Ranger carried undeniable weight. The defendant's anxiety escalated visibly. His hands trembled slightly, tapping against the armrests. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering, but the words seemed meaningless. The courtroom's attention remained fixed on the child and the dog. Every subtle motion, the slight tilt of Ranger's ears, the determined gaze of Emma, conveyed a story more powerful than any spoken testimony from adults. It was an unspoken collaboration, instinct meeting courage, exposing the hidden truth that had eluded the most meticulous investigation. Emma, gaining confidence, spoke a little louder, reiterating her point in her own childlike way. "He hurt me," she said, her voice trembling but steady. Ranger responded by shifting slightly closer, protective and alert. Officer Hale offered a reassuring smile but remained vigilant, knowing the defendant could react unpredictably. The gallery leaned in, absorbing the words, the reaction, and the undeniable truth unfolding before them. The court's formality seemed secondary to the extraordinary bond of trust, an instinct that now dominated the room. The judge allowed the jury a moment to absorb the testimony. Faces in the box were tense, eyes widening. Some leaned forward, catching every subtle cue from Emma and Ranger. Others whispered quietly to each other, processing the weight of the child's simple yet devastating revelation. The prosecutors prepared to integrate the statement into their ongoing narrative, reinforcing the undeniable link between the object discovered and the alleged crime. Every adult present felt the courtroom tilt on a new axis, one defined by innocence, courage, and instinct rather than mere words or procedural rules. The defendant tried to speak again, voice shaking. This is circumstantial," he stammered. The words sounded hollow even to him. He could feel the courtroom's collective scrutiny pressing down, anchored by the child and the dog. Ranger's growl intensified slightly, eyes unwavering. Every subtle gesture from Emma seemed to draw the dog's attention toward Tanner, as if reinforcing the truth of her statement. The courtroom's dynamic had changed entirely. Strategy and intimidation no longer held power in the presence of instinctive truth. Officer Hale gently whispered to Emma, "It's okay. You're helping everyone understand." She nodded slightly, her small frame quivering with adrenaline. Ranger nudged her softly, confirming her courage and guiding her presence. Emma's tiny voice had already shifted the courtroom's attention, but now she began to understand the power her observation held. Even without full comprehension of the law or the trial, she realized she had contributed something enormous. The courtroom watched in awe, knowing that what was occurring was extraordinary and rare. The defense attorney attempted to counter the moment, but words fell flat. The child's statement, corroborated by the K-9's behavior and the discovered evidence, created a chain reaction impossible to dismiss. Every adult present could sense the shift. The authority in the room had subtly passed to a 3-year-old and her canine companion. Witnesses who had previously prepared detailed statements now seemed secondary to the raw, instinctive truth emerging before them. The courtroom was captivated, the tension mounting with each passing second. As the prosecutors began to tie the evidence and Emma's statement together, the gallery reacted with a mix of awe and disbelief. Cameras flashed, capturing expressions of astonishment, while spectators whispered softly to one another. Emma remained calm beside Ranger, oblivious to the attention she had drawn. Officer Hale kept his focus on the room, ensuring the dog's behavior remained controlled while allowing the child's testimony to unfold naturally. The room's energy had shifted irrevocably. No one could look away from the duo who had disrupted the trial's expected trajectory. The judge called for a brief recess, acknowledging the extraordinary moment. "We will allow the jury and legal teams to review the newly discovered evidence and the child's statement," she said. The defendant slumped in his seat, exhausted, eyes darting nervously. Ranger remained beside Emma, alert and protective. Officer Hale whispered a soft, encouraging word, reinforcing her bravery. The courtroom remained charged, every heartbeat in sync with the tension and anticipation that had reached a fever pitch. Even brief procedural pauses could not diminish the impact of the moment. Outside the formal courtroom proceedings, whispers circulated rapidly. "Did you see that? A 3-year-old just revealed a critical piece of the case," said one reporter to another. Cameras flashed, journalists typed furiously, yet all recognized that words could never fully capture the intensity and courage displayed by Emma and Ranger. Inside the courtroom, the judge, jury, attorneys, and spectators understood. The innocence of a child and the instincts of a trained K-9 had illuminated the truth where adults had previously failed. The trial had entered a new, unpredictable chapter. As the recess concluded, the courtroom reconvened. Emma remained seated beside Ranger, small hands still resting on his fur. The dog's presence provided an unspoken confidence, a shield against the uncertainty surrounding the case. Officer Hale guided her gently, reminding her to remain calm. The prosecution prepared to proceed, carefully weaving the child's statement and the newly discovered evidence into the narrative. Every adult in the room understood that this trial, once predictable, had become a test of courage, intuition, and instinct, and the outcome was now far from certain. Even the defendant realized that conventional tactics would no longer suffice. His hands trembled slightly as he attempted to regain composure. Every subtle movement of Emma and Ranger reinforced the truth of her words. The courtroom's atmosphere was electric, charged with the tension of revelation, the awe of observation, and the anticipation of what would come next. The smallest voice and the trained instincts of a dog had taken control of a room meant to be governed by law, strategy, and procedure, and no one could look away. The judge finally called the proceedings to order. "We will proceed with testimony and evidence presentation, taking into account the statements and observations already made," she said firmly. Every person in the courtroom leaned in, their attention riveted to the child and the dog. The gallery remained hushed, reporters ready to capture every word. Emma's courage had shifted the momentum, Ranger's instincts had validated it, and the trial now moved forward under the undeniable influence of the smallest and most extraordinary witnesses in the room. The courtroom returned to tense silence as the recess ended. Emma remained kneeling beside Ranger, her small hands clutching the dog's fur for reassurance. Officer Hale stayed alert, a protective presence, watching the defendant and the subtle cues Ranger gave. The gallery and jury leaned forward, their focus fixed on the toddler and the K9. What had started as a routine courtroom proceeding had now transformed into something extraordinary, a trial guided not only by law but by the instinct, courage, and observation of a 3-year-old and a trained police dog. Michael Tanner, the defendant, sat rigidly in his chair, hands gripping the armrests. His face was pale, eyes darting nervously between the child, Ranger, and the judge. His carefully constructed confidence had collapsed under the weight of Emma's observations and Ranger's instinctive behavior. Each movement of the dog, every word whispered by the child, amplified the pressure he felt. For the first time, Tanner realized that the courtroom was no longer under his control. Adults could strategize and argue, but here, truth had taken on an almost sentient presence. The judge adjusted her glasses and addressed the courtroom. "We will proceed with the examination of evidence, taking into account all new developments," she said firmly. Every eye in the room followed the bailiff as he brought forward the object Emma had identified. The prosecution prepared meticulously, linking the item to the allegations with a precision no one had anticipated. Tanner's attorney whispered urgently, attempting to assert control, but even their words seemed powerless in the face of the extraordinary partnership between child and dog. Emma's voice, though small, was steady as she watched the proceedings unfold. "He did it," she whispered again, eyes wide and unwavering. Ranger growled low, a deliberate, controlled sound that drew the attention of everyone present. The dog's posture, alert, coiled, and protective, reinforced the child's statement. Reporters leaned forward, capturing the improbable yet undeniable revelation. Even seasoned courtroom observers were visibly shaken. A toddler's words, validated by a trained K9, now carried the authority of truth in a room dominated by adults. The prosecution carefully examined the item from the bag, demonstrating how it tied directly to the defendant's actions. Every movement, every gesture of Emma and Ranger seemed synchronized, a silent testament to the bond and understanding between them. The courtroom watched in a hushed reverence. Tanner's hands trembled, his face a mask of mounting fear. His lawyer's whispers grew frantic, yet their efforts were futile against the combined force of instinct and innocence. For the adults in the room, the trial had become a lesson in humility. Truth could emerge in the most unexpected forms. Officer Hale maintained his position near Emma, ensuring her safety while allowing her to remain engaged. "You're doing an incredible job," he whispered softly. Ranger's head shifted slightly, nudging the child in affirmation. Emma's courage, paired with Ranger's trained instincts, created a subtle yet powerful authority within the courtroom. The jury leaned in, eyes wide, silently acknowledging the impact of what they were witnessing. Each heartbeat in the room seemed to echo with tension, anticipation, and awe. The defendant, attempting to regain composure, finally spoke, voice trembling. This is circumstantial," he exclaimed. His argument fell flat, weakened by the undeniable corroboration provided by Emma's words and Ranger's behavior. The dog's growl intensified, controlled but unwavering, as if responding to Tanner's protest. Emma's eyes followed Ranger's gaze, small finger pointing subtly toward the defendant. The courtroom collectively held its breath, witnessing a moment of truth that transcended conventional procedure, strategy, and rhetoric. The judge's expression remained composed, though her eyes betrayed the magnitude of the unfolding events. "The court will consider all evidence and testimony presented," she said. Her voice carried weight, but she allowed the extraordinary moment between the child and the dog to remain central. Reporters, cameras flashed intermittently, yet the true focus remained on the duo who had shifted the trial's course. Emma's innocence and Ranger's disciplined response had revealed what adults could not: hidden truths, overlooked evidence, and the unambiguous impact of the defendant's actions. The prosecution moved to highlight the sequence of events that led to the discovery of the object. Each step was carefully documented, demonstrating how Emma's instinctive observation, supported by Ranger's trained responses, exposed evidence that had been previously missed. The courtroom absorbed every detail, the tension building to a palpable crescendo. Tanner's hands shook slightly, a physical manifestation of his internal unraveling. He realized that no amount of strategy could counteract the raw, instinctive authority emanating from the child and the dog. Emma's quiet courage was remarkable. Though small and tender in age, she displayed a clarity of focus and determination that surpassed her years. Every glance, every subtle movement spoke volumes. Ranger responded to her cues instinctively, reinforcing the significance of her observations. Officer Hale, observing the seamless communication between child and K9, felt a surge of pride and reassurance. The courtroom had become a stage where innocence and training revealed the truth more effectively than arguments, documents, or legal maneuvers ever could. The gallery watched, captivated. Witnesses who had previously prepared extensive testimony now seemed secondary to the extraordinary alliance unfolding before them. The prosecution summarized the object's role in corroborating Emma's statements, emphasizing the undeniable truth it represented. The courtroom was electrified, every person aware that they were witnessing something rare, a moment where instinct, courage, and innocence illuminated reality with precision and clarity. The defendant's composure collapsed further. Sweat glistened on his forehead, hands trembling on the armrests. He attempted to speak again, voice weak. This isn't proof." But Ranger's growl cut through the words, low and deliberate, commanding attention and emphasizing the truth of Emma's statement. The child's quiet voice had become a force in the courtroom, validated by the instincts of a trained K9. Adults, lawyers, and spectators alike were powerless to counter this unique revelation. Officer Hale whispered to Emma, "Just stay with Ranger. You're safe and you're helping everyone understand." The dog nudged her gently, offering reassurance and strength. Emma's eyes met Ranger, and a subtle nod passed between them, a silent agreement, a shared understanding. The courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively, every heartbeat synchronized to the tension, anticipation, and quiet authority of the Child K9 partnership. Every subtle reaction of Emma and Ranger carried more weight than any formal testimony or argument. The prosecution began integrating the child's observations and the object's evidence into a cohesive narrative. They walked the jury through the sequence, highlighting the unique circumstances under which the discovery occurred. The courtroom remained captivated, hanging on every word, every gesture, every subtle cue from the child and the dog. Tanner's anxiety became increasingly visible. His attempts to redirect attention or discredit the evidence fell flat against the unassailable authenticity of instinctive truth. The judge allowed a brief pause for reflection. "We will continue with careful examination," she said, acknowledging the courtroom's extraordinary tension. Emma remained calm beside Ranger, small hands on his fur, drawing courage from his presence. Officer Hale stayed alert, ensuring her safety and reinforcing the dog's disciplined focus. The gallery whispered quietly among themselves, fully aware that the trial had been irrevocably altered by a toddler and a K-9 officer who had exposed what adults had missed. Tanner slumped slightly in his chair, every muscle taut with anxiety. He understood at last that conventional tactics could not overcome the power of innocence paired with trained instinct. Emma's words, simple yet devastating, had revealed a truth beyond manipulation. Ranger's behavior validated her observations, creating an authority that resonated through every corner of the courtroom. The jury, gallery, and attorneys were all acutely aware of the extraordinary nature of the moment. The judge called the courtroom to order. "Proceed with the next stage of testimony," she instructed, voice steady. Every person present understood that the trial had entered a new chapter. Emma remained beside Ranger, calm yet determined, her presence a beacon of courage. The dog's trained vigilance and intuitive response had reinforced her actions, creating a courtroom dynamic where innocence and instinct dominated the narrative. The defendant's fear was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the shifting power. Even the press, trained to observe without emotional involvement, could not mask their awe. "Unbelievable," whispered a reporter. "A child and a dog uncovered evidence no one else could." Camera flashes punctuated the silence, yet the true drama lay in the subtle interactions between the toddler and her K-9 companion. Emma's courage had transformed a routine trial into an unforgettable demonstration of instinct, observation, and the power of trust. The courtroom hung on every movement, every glance, every growl, every whispered word, aware that the outcome rested on the extraordinary alliance of a child and a dog. The courtroom was electric, every eye fixed on the small, resolute figure of Emma kneeling beside Ranger. Officer Hale remained close, vigilant, yet unobtrusive, allowing the child to take center stage. Ranger's massive body shifted slightly, alert, a silent sentinel reinforcing the child's courage. The gallery leaned forward in anticipation, journalists poised to capture every fleeting expression. Every adult in the room felt the weight of the moment. A 3-year-old and a K-9 were commanding attention in a space normally governed by experience, procedure, and legal strategy. Michael Tanner, the defendant, sat rigidly, jaw clenched, hands shaking as his confidence eroded before the courtroom. His lawyer whispered, voice tight with urgency, attempting to provide reassurance, but even the most seasoned counsel could sense the futility. Tanner's carefully rehearsed composure had collapsed, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Each subtle movement of Ranger, every quiet gesture from Emma, undermined his presence. He realized with growing dread that the trial had become something entirely unpredictable, an arena where instinct and innocence wielded more authority than strategy or manipulation. The judge's gavel tapped lightly against the bench. "We will proceed with the witness testimony, taking into account the newly revealed evidence and statements," she instructed. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances. The prosecution rose, methodically outlining the sequence of events, integrating Emma's observations and the object she had identified. Every gesture, every glance of the child and dog was noted, reinforcing the gravity of the case. The courtroom leaned in collectively, hanging on every detail, every interaction, every subtle cue. Emma's small hands rested gently on Ranger's fur, drawing courage from his calm presence. "He did it," she whispered again, more confidently this time. Ranger responded immediately, growling low and deliberate, eyes unwavering on the defendant. The sound reverberated subtly through the courtroom, a low, undeniable confirmation of the truth of Emma's statement. Even without understanding the legal complexities, the room instinctively recognized the weight carried by this silent affirmation. The energy in the courtroom shifted palpably, tension thickening with each heartbeat. The prosecution carefully demonstrated how the object connected to the allegations. Every movement, every explanation, was punctuated by Ranger's attentive posture and Emma's subtle gestures. The gallery absorbed the unfolding narrative with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing what words could hardly convey, the partnership between a child and a trained K-9 altering the course of a trial in real time. Tanner's hands trembled, lips pressed tightly together, unable to regain control. His face betrayed panic, each subtle reaction magnified by the courtroom's focused attention. Officer Hale whispered softly to Emma, offering reassurance without distraction. "You're helping everyone understand. Stay with Ranger." The dog shifted slightly, nudging her, communicating calm and affirmation. Emma's courage, amplified by the K-9's instinctive response, became the unspoken authority in the room. The jury, previously focused on conventional testimony, now leaned in, fully absorbed by the extraordinary dynamic. Every subtle motion, every whispered word, every growl carried more weight than any argument or legal maneuver. The courtroom was captivated by the raw authenticity of the moment. The defense attorney attempted a feeble objection, voice trembling. "Your Honor, the testimony is unreliable given the child's age." Tanner's hands clenched as he whispered urgently to his counsel. The judge's gaze, firm and unwavering, met the attorney's. "The court recognizes the statement and observations as relevant, given the corroborating evidence and K-9 confirmation," she said. The defendant's panic intensified. Every heartbeat in the room seemed synchronized with Ranger's growls and Emma's small, determined gestures. The courtroom had shifted. The conventional hierarchy of authority had been overturned. Emma took a small, tentative step closer to Ranger. Her tiny voice rose slightly, yet remained clear. "He's lying." Ranger responded immediately, alert and tense, head low, muscles coiled. The gallery gasped. Tanner's face drained of color. For the first time, the defendant could not deny the combination of intuition, courage, and trained instinct that surrounded him. His attempts to interject or manipulate the narrative faltered under the undeniable presence of a toddler and a K-9 officer who had already revealed the truth. The prosecution moved carefully, emphasizing the sequence of events and linking the object, Emma's statements and Ranger's behavior. The courtroom hung on each word, absorbing the extraordinary narrative unfolding before them. Tanner's shoulders slumped slightly, anxiety etched into every line of his face. Witnesses who had previously prepared extensive statements now seemed secondary to the child K-9 dynamic. The gallery whispered, some covering their mouths in shock, some nodding in recognition of the moment's profound significance. Ranger shifted slightly, nudging Emma with his massive head, offering reassurance. Officer Hale whispered again, reinforcing her courage and maintaining her focus. The child's understanding of the situation was growing, bolstered by the dog's instincts and her own observational clarity. The courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively, breath held in suspense. Every adult, lawyer, and juror was acutely aware of the extraordinary nature of the trial. A toddler's bravery, validated by a trained K-9, had fundamentally altered the proceedings. The defendant, Michael Tanner, finally slumped further in his seat, hands clutching the armrests, jaw tight with fear. Every argument seemed meaningless against the combined authority of Emma's observations and Ranger's instinctive reactions. The child's words, so simple yet devastatingly effective, had illuminated the truth in a way adults could not counter. Ranger's low growl punctuated each revelation, reinforcing the credibility of Emma's statements. The courtroom's energy was electric, tension mingling with awe, disbelief, and the recognition of unprecedented events. The judge allowed the prosecution to question Emma further. With Ranger at her side, Emma began pointing out specific details, small gestures that corroborated her earlier statements. Each nod, each finger directed at the evidence, reinforced her credibility. The dog's attentive posture mirrored her movements, growls punctuating moments of emphasis. The gallery leaned in collectively, eyes wide, reporters clicking away, capturing the unrepeatable display of courage, intuition, and instinct. Tanner's hands trembled, and his lawyer's attempts to redirect attention fell flat. "Emma," the judge asked gently, "can you show us what you saw?" Emma's small finger pointed at the defendant, eyes wide and unwavering. Ranger growled low, protective and deliberate. The gallery gasped again, a collective reaction to the subtle yet unmistakable communication between child and dog. Tanner's confidence eroded further, replaced by panic and fear. Even the defense team recognized that conventional legal strategies had little influence against the raw, instinctive authority dominating the courtroom. Officer Hale whispered softly, "You're doing great, Emma. Just stay with Ranger." She nodded slightly, taking a deep breath, emboldened by the dog's presence. Every movement she made was mirrored by Ranger's attentive posture, growl, and gaze. The courtroom collectively absorbed the extraordinary display, understanding that the smallest, seemingly powerless voices had taken control of the narrative. Every spectator, reporter, and juror was captivated, unable to look away. The prosecution carefully tied together the evidence, Emma's testimony and Ranger's reactions, crafting a narrative impossible to ignore. The courtroom's atmosphere was thick with suspense. Tanner's anxiety grew palpable. Every subtle twitch and hesitation betrayed the collapse of his control. The jury leaned in, eyes wide, absorbing every motion, every whisper, every subtle growl. The gallery remained hushed, tension so thick it felt tangible. The courtroom had transformed into a stage where courage, observation, and instinct commanded authority over experience, strategy, and procedure. Emma, gaining confidence, whispered again, "He did it," Ranger growled in immediate response, a low, powerful affirmation. The courtroom reacted as if struck by an invisible current. The defendant slumped further, panic now overt and undeniable. His carefully constructed arguments crumbled under the weight of a child's observation and a K-9's instinct. The gallery murmured, whispers of astonishment circulating. Reporters jotted notes furiously, cameras flashing intermittently, attempting to capture what words alone could never convey. The unprecedented courtroom partnership altering the trial's course. The judge's gaze swept the room. "Proceed with evidence integration and testimony," she instructed, voice calm but firm. Every person present remained rapt, aware that the proceedings were now dominated by the unspoken authority of Emma and Ranger. The prosecution continued, weaving together every detail, every observation, every growl, every gesture. Tanner's hands shook. His attempts at control were futile. The courtroom hung on every movement, every breath, every subtle cue, knowing that the climax of this extraordinary trial was fast approaching. The courtroom was electric, every heartbeat synchronized with the tension emanating from Emma and Ranger. The small child remained kneeling beside the massive K-9, her tiny fingers clutching his fur for reassurance. Officer Hale stayed close, vigilant, ensuring both child and dog remained safe, yet allowing the extraordinary unfolding of events to proceed without interference. Every eye in the room, from jury members to reporters to spectators, was fixed on the toddler and the dog who had taken command of a trial meant to be governed by adults. Michael Tanner, the defendant, slumped in his chair, pale and trembling. His carefully constructed facade of confidence had collapsed entirely. Words that had once flowed smoothly in rehearsed speeches now caught in his throat. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Tanner barely registered it. Every subtle motion, every word, and every low growl from Ranger reminded him that he was no longer in control. The courtroom's dynamic had shifted completely. Instinct and innocence now wielded power greater than any legal strategy. The judge leaned forward, her gaze piercing yet calm. "We will proceed with the full review of the evidence and testimony," she said, her tone carrying authority. The prosecution rose, systematically presenting each piece of evidence, tying it meticulously to the observations Emma had made and the K-9's reactions. The gallery watched in rapt attention, absorbing every subtle gesture, every nuanced movement of the child and the dog. Ranger's eyes never left Tanner, low growl punctuating moments when the defendant shifted or attempted to speak. Emma, small yet determined, took a deep breath and whispered, "He can't hide." Ranger responded instantly, growling with authority, posture coiled yet restrained. The courtroom gasped collectively. Tanner's hands trembled visibly, the tension in his shoulders palpable. For months he had believed he could manipulate, charm, and mislead the adults in the courtroom. Now, a 3-year-old child and a trained K-9 had pierced through every carefully laid plan, revealing the truth in ways no strategy could counter. The prosecution presented the object again, emphasizing its significance. Every step of their argument highlighted the sequence of events, corroborating Emma's observations and Ranger's reactions. Officer Hale stayed close to Emma, whispering soft words of encouragement. "You're helping everyone see the truth," he murmured. Ranger nudged the child gently, reinforcing her courage. Every subtle action communicated an unspoken message. Bravery and instinct could unveil what adults had overlooked. The courtroom leaned in collectively, fully aware that they were witnessing a moment extraordinary in both its clarity and emotional impact. Tanner's face drained of color as the prosecution began connecting the dots, tying the object, Emma's statements, and Ranger's instinctive cues into a cohesive narrative. Every detail emphasized the undeniable truth emerging from the smallest, most unexpected witnesses. Tanner tried to speak, voice quivering. This is circumstantial," he stammered. Ranger's growl resonated low, deliberate, and commanding, cutting through the room's silence. Emma's eyes met the dog, tiny hands on his fur, and she nodded subtly. The courtroom recognized the unspoken alliance between the two. The gallery was spellbound. Reporters whispered excitedly to one another, some capturing frantic notes while others fumbled to frame photographs of the extraordinary scene. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every gesture, every word, every sound. The courtroom's energy was taut with anticipation, suspense, and awe. Tanner's confidence had crumbled entirely. He slumped in his chair, jaw tight, hands shaking. Words had lost their power. No argument could compete with the combination of Emma's simple truth and Ranger's instinctive validation. The judge gestured for calm. "We will now hear the final testimony from the child," she said. Emma's voice, small but resolute, cut through the tension. "He hurt people," she said. Ranger growled low and measured, reinforcing her statement. The room reacted instantaneously, gasps, murmurs, the scribbling of notes, and the soft clicking of camera shutters. Tanner's panic intensified visibly. He understood that a child's words, supported by a trained K-9, had become more credible than any strategy or legal maneuver he could mount. The prosecution guided the jury through the sequence of events again, integrating Emma's observations and Ranger's instinctive behavior to reconstruct the truth. Every movement was deliberate, carefully orchestrated to showcase the extraordinary collaboration between the child and the K-9. The courtroom watched in awe. Tanner's lawyer attempted to object, citing procedural concerns, but the judge waved the objection aside. The evidence was undeniable, amplified by the raw, instinctive power of a toddler and a trained police dog, who had revealed what adults had overlooked. Emma leaned slightly closer to Ranger, whispering quietly, "Find it." Ranger's body shifted immediately, alert and tense, head low, muscles coiled. Officer Hale subtly guided the child while maintaining control over the K-9. The room held its collective breath. This was no longer just about evidence. It was about instinct, courage, and truth manifesting in real time. The jury, gallery, and courtroom staff were fully aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A partnership between a child and a dog that had taken control of the narrative. The prosecution presented additional details about the defendant's actions, connecting them directly to the object Emma had identified and the events she had described. Every subtle motion Emma made, every gesture of Ranger, reinforced the credibility of the narrative. The courtroom energy was electric, charged with suspense, awe, and anticipation. Tanner's anxiety had reached its peak. He realized fully that conventional tactics would no longer suffice. The unassailable truth had emerged, guided by innocence and instinct rather than strategy. Officer Hale whispered again, "You're doing amazing. Just stay with Ranger." The child's small hands tightened slightly on the dog's fur, drawing courage from his presence. Ranger shifted slightly, a subtle nudge to reassure her. Every person in the courtroom felt the intensity. A tiny child and a disciplined K-9 officer had unveiled what adults had failed to uncover. The trial, once predictable and procedural, had become a testament to courage, instinct, and the extraordinary power of trust between two unlikely partners. Tanner's voice finally faltered completely. He slumped in his chair, eyes wide with panic. "This can't be happening," he whispered to his attorney. Ranger growled, low and deliberate, as if to underscore the truth of Emma's statement. The prosecution summarized the chain of events again, leaving no room for doubt. The courtroom absorbed every nuance: the child's courage, the dog's disciplined instinct, the unraveling of a man who had once believed himself untouchable. Every subtle cue reinforced the overwhelming reality. The truth had been revealed. The judge's gavel struck lightly. "We will now proceed with closing statements, taking into account all evidence, testimony, and observations," she said. The room remained hushed, tension vibrating in the air. Emma stayed kneeling beside Ranger, calm and determined, a tiny anchor amidst the storm of emotion and revelation. Officer Hale ensured the child's safety while respecting the solemnity and intensity of the moment. Every heartbeat in the courtroom seemed synchronized, the audience fully aware that history was being made in real time. The prosecution delivered their closing arguments, emphasizing Emma's observations, Ranger's instinct, and the critical evidence uncovered. The jury, captivated, absorbed every word, every subtle motion of the child and dog. Tanner remained frozen, anxiety etched into every line of his face. The gallery whispered softly, reporters clicked rapidly, and every adult in the room recognized the extraordinary nature of what had transpired. The courtroom had been transformed into a stage where innocence and instinct dictated the outcome, leaving conventional authority and strategy powerless. Finally, the judge addressed the court. "This trial has demonstrated that truth can emerge from the most unexpected sources," she said, eyes sweeping across the room. "The court acknowledges the courage of the child and the discipline of the K-9 officer who have revealed crucial evidence." Emma whispered once more, small but clear, "It's over." Ranger nudged her gently, eyes softening slightly, yet remaining vigilant. The defendant slumped further, powerless to resist the undeniable conclusion. The courtroom collectively exhaled, the tension finally breaking, replaced by awe and solemn respect. The jury returned their verdict swiftly, influenced by the extraordinary revelations. The defendant, Michael Tanner, was found guilty on all counts. Ranger's growl softened, a low sigh of relief seeming to resonate in the room. Emma's small frame relaxed slightly, eyes bright, drawing reassurance from the K-9 beside her. Officer Hale smiled softly, proud and relieved. The courtroom erupted in subdued applause, reporters capturing the historic moment. The trial, once ordinary, had been transformed into a testament to courage, instinct, and the profound impact of unexpected heroes. As the gavel struck to close the case, the courtroom remained alive with whispers of astonishment. Spectators marveled at the partnership between a child and a K-9 that had shaped the outcome of a trial. Journalists typed feverishly, capturing the extraordinary story. Emma, kneeling beside Ranger, had demonstrated bravery beyond her years. Ranger, disciplined and intuitive, had validated her observations. Together, they had ensured justice was served in a way no adult could have orchestrated. Outside the courtroom, crowds gathered, reporters broadcasting the remarkable tale of a 3-year-old girl and a police dog who had revealed the truth. Emma, small but heroic, held Ranger's paw briefly, both drawing strength from the other. Officer Hale stood nearby, quietly proud of their extraordinary partnership. The trial had ended, but the story would be remembered, recounted, and celebrated. A reminder that courage and instinct, no matter the source, could illuminate even the darkest truths. That moment, Emma and Ranger had changed lives. They had shown that innocence and training, combined with courage and trust, could overcome fear, manipulation, and deceit. The courtroom, the jury, the spectators, and even the defendant had witnessed an extraordinary revelation. Justice had been served, guided not solely by law but by the heart and instinct of the smallest, bravest voices. And for Emma, Ranger, and Officer Hale, it was a triumph of courage, trust, and the undeniable power of truth.